very informal. Hey, everyone, greetings. This is one of the most significant and important interviews I've done in my entire career. I'm here to welcome Mr. Jonathan Pollard to Outspoken. Welcome, Mr. Pollard.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's absolutely fascinating to be able to talk to you. And today we're going to be focusing on the Syrian conflict, the conflict in Syria around the Druze. But before we get to that, I do need to, mention Mr. Pollard's bio. Many people are aware that Mr. Pollard's name is kind of a household name in the United States. He was he was an intelligence analyst for the U.S. Navy, and spent many years in the intelligence community. And in 1979, he his security clearance was revoked because he divulged classified information to a defense attaché. Then he went back to work. And then I'm going to kind of skip ahead. Later, he was also convicted of passing classified intelligence to Israel, and he spent 30 years in prison. He was released on November 20th, 2015. And after his release, he was forced to spend 5 years on probation in the New York City area. And in 2020, after his parole was expired, he immigrated to Israel, where, he's been, as I gather from interviews, quite warmly received by members of the public, even though obviously his legacy is complex at the level of the government. So I just wanted to get that out there because it happened. Is there anything you want to add to that, Mr. Pollard, before we go on and talk about the Druze? We'll circle back, of course,
right. The first issue has to do with the defense attaché that I was working with and had approval to work with him. He was South African, and at the time it was illegal. This was under Jimmy Carter. It was illegal for the American intelligence community to work with the South Africans.
Mm-hmm.
I was given permission in writing to do so because it was in support of the Nimitz carrier battle group that was en route to the Indian Ocean to help free our diplomatic hostages in Tehran.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, when some other people in Washington found out about this operation, as happens in Washington, I had to do something that I morally couldn't do. And so it went, as we say, it went south. And eventually I cleared my name and I got my clearances back. Washington is a very complex place, and there are lots of agendas. And I was a young intelligence officer at the time and didn't realize, I guess, the complexity of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, may rest in peace, who was very wise to these things, told me to extricate myself immediately because I didn't have what he called a get out of jail card.
Mm-hmm.
And
excuse me, can I jump in, Mr. Pollard? Had your father been in the intelligence community also?
Yeah, he did a lot of work for the intelligence community. His specialty was biological warfare. So he got to know a lot of people overseas as well as in the United States, obviously. And he didn't want me going into intelligence work. He said, "You're much too idealistic." And he said, you basically have to become almost criminally cynical when you go into this work. And as with most things with my father, in retrospect, he was 101% correct. But when you're young, you don't seem to appreciate that fact. There's an old statement by Mark Twain that goes the following, or go along the following. He said, "When I was 15, I thought my father was an idiot. And by the time I became 20, I was amazed at how intelligent he had become." And I guess that's the same way for most parents. But I just wanted to clear that one aspect of my bio up. That's all.
Thank you very much. So we'll circle back to your, the drama of your arrest and conviction, your years in prison, your probation in New York, and your repatriation, or your, I guess, immigration to the state of
Actually, you're right. The first time it was classified as a repatriation.
repatriation. I have a lot of questions about all of that, human questions, really. But the reason you were kind enough to fit me into your schedule today is that you want to tell the world about, I'm going to put it the way I imagine you would put it, why Israel is involved in a military or military adjacent conflict in Syria around the population of Druze, many hundreds of whom have been killed, both military and civilians. Could you give us the background on that, please, Mr. Pollard?
Sure. One of the consequences of our war right now, our multi-front war, was the very surprise destruction of Bashar Assad in Syria, the dictator of Syria. The force that defeated him is an Al-Qaeda force. It goes by the acronym of HTS, led by a fellow by the name of Al-Julani. I prefer to use that name because it's his Al-Qaeda name rather than Shara, which is another name that he goes by when he's in more polite company.
Right.
So this
Mr.
surprise.
Pollard, can I just jump in for 1 minute? Because you and your audience may know a great deal more about these geopolitical events than the average American who may be watching this, or person around the world watching. When you say it was a surprise that the Assad regime fell, I mean, I imagine Israeli intelligence doesn't have a lot of surprises in that area. Why do you say it was a surprise?
It was a surprise because nothing had changed actually in a very long time. And the process of the destruction of the Assad regime, especially the army, was a lengthy process. It was kind of an attrition of the capabilities and motivation of the Syrian soldiers and the army that were a little bit difficult to track because of the location. So that, when there's a tree in the forest that's completely rotten, it just takes a very little amount of pressure or power to just tip the thing over. It's rotten, completely rotten. And this is what happened with the Syrian army.
I see.
The Al-Qaeda forces that were further in the northern part of the country, in a place called Idlib, were completely supported, trained, equipped by Turkey. Mm-hmm. This is an important point for people to understand from the start. Turkey, under their leader Erdogan, has designs on Syria. Why? Because the current Turkish leader fancies himself a latter-day sultan that wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire, which is why we call his government a neo-Ottoman government. But it's based on Muslim Brotherhood or Salafi philosophy, Al-Qaeda, basically. Right. So when the time was right, when nobody was watching this
Mr.
front.
Pollard, I'm so sorry to jump in again, but what you're telling me is so startling. If that's the goal of the Erdogan regime, why is the West so welcoming to Turkey?
Turkey is a very interesting country in the sense that it is a member of NATO. Mm-hmm. So on that front, he's an accepted, or the country is an accepted member of the community of nations,
Right.
especially of the West. But on the other hand, people are just not aware of the fact that he is a brutal dictator within the country.
Okay.
He's pursued a policy of genocide towards the largest minority in Turkey, the Kurds, and that he and Qatar, their allies, are very much into supporting and disseminating the Muslim Brotherhood philosophy
Wow.
throughout the
So
Middle East.
that's a real threat. So now let's go back to Syria. So Erdogan is interested in expanding into Syria as part of
So
this.
what happened
push.
was that the moment was chosen, and this Al Qaeda army with Turkish support uh, totally destroyed in a matter of days the entire Syrian army. They just crumbled, which was a big surprise within Israel, even in amongst the intelligence organizations monitoring the state of the Syrian army. And suddenly we found ourselves not just facing the Iranians anymore because they fled. The Muslim Brotherhood basically is an enemy, a blood enemy of the Iranians because they're Shia. It's a
Wow.
different sect.
Right.
So the Iranian was suddenly this great fear that we had of the Iranian threat to the north disappeared, and they just fled. And what replaced it was something, in my opinion, far worse. What replaced it was a Turkish-supported terrorist organization masquerading as a legitimate or acceptable political party. And this is something that's very hard for people to understand. The Trump administration was sold basically a bill of goods by the Turks and by the Qataris in particular, that this new government, which goes by the acronym of the HTS, but it's an Al Qaeda organization, was one that could be brought into the international community of nations.
Why
The
would
leader,
you think that that would be possible given Al Qaeda's reputation and actions?
well, logical people such as yourself would be very concerned about that. But the problem was that the administration is staffed by individuals that are compromised by their involvement, either politically or financially, with Qatar. And it was Qatar's plan to have the Trump administration see this new government for something that it wasn't. That is, they wanted to present this guy, and they did. They had him presented to President Trump in Saudi Arabia, and he presents Abdulani, the leader, presents very well. He doesn't wear a keffiyeh. He doesn't carry a Kalashnikov rifle. He doesn't have a knife between his mouth. But he did have a bounty on his head, an American bounty on his head for being a terrorist, as did his organization. And suddenly, this man in a Brioni suit and a trimmed beard walks into Mohammed bin Sultan's office, so to speak, in Saudi Arabia, and meets the president of the United States.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I personally and many others were horrified at this meeting because the guy is part of the same group that was involved with 9/11.
Whoa.
I mean, this guy is part of an organization that ended up killing over 3,000 American citizens. And so,
I was there. Yeah.
no, I was very concerned for the
Right.
president's safety. But, the heir apparent of Saudi Arabia was the host.
Right.
So you ask why, if the guy is being supported by Turkey and Qatar, why was Saudi Arabia, who are not they're not friends with the Qataris for sure.
Right.
Why
Right.
was Mohammed bin Sultan actually acting as a host. The reason is because in the mind of the Saudis and the Emiratis, the
Right.
UAE, Syria is in play. What that means is they're trying, the Saudis and the Emiratis are trying to displace with money,
Uh-huh.
displace the influence of the Qataris and the Turks. Well, it isn't going to work because the Qataris have the same political philosophy, the Muslim brother philosophy of Jolani and that new Turkish, the new Syrian government. These are the same people, by the way, that are in Hamas.
So,
There's
Mr.
really
Pollard, can I ask you to pause there so I can restate what I think you're saying and make sure I understand it? Just because it's a very complex situation. We have recently formalized or solidified, we, the United States, um, alliances with Saudi Arabia and Israel. They've been working well together. There's, President Trump was instrumental in with the Abraham Accords and bringing about kind of a more peaceful set of options in with Israel and Saudi Arabia. Now you're saying, if I hear you correctly, that there's a destabilizing factor that has been newly introduced in Syria, which is just north of Israel. I want to remind everyone, um, with the collapse of the Assad regime. And that is kind of being used as kind of a proxy staging base, essentially, for the Muslim Islamist, like radical Islamist desires, goals of Turkey, which is masquerading essentially in your view as kind of a good ally, NATO, et cetera, but really wants kind of Ottoman expansion, and Qatar. And Qatar is trying to be a power player. Qatar, which is also aligned with a more extreme Islam, expansionist Islam. It, Qatar and Saudi Arabia are not aligned, and it
correct.
really, Saudi Arabia is a more manageable ally for both Israel and the United States. And I'm going to wrap this up in just a minute. There's money flowing, which I've actually heard, through the grapevine, from Qatar to key gatekeepers and influencers in the Trump administration and in, I would say, also the conservative movement in Washington, D.C. Did I restate that
100%.
correctly?
You got it. You got it. You got it.
That's shocking.
Very
That's
clearly.
very dangerous. That's
No,
such a big deal.
no, it
So,
is a big deal because
okay, keep talking.
a lot of people don't realize the pernicious influence that Qatar, it's a little country that is fabulously wealthy because of natural gas exports, the pernicious influence that Qatar has, not just within the administration,
Mhm.
but within academia as well. This
Hmm.
situation that we saw on October 8th, just to briefly state it, where you had, in the wake of this horrible invasion of Israel by Hamas, um, you had this explosion of Israel hatred and Jewish hatred all over American campuses, and that explosion was caused by years and years and years of Qatari investment in these universities.
Wow.
Okay,
Wow.
yeah, they're very smart. I mean, basically, everything that we as Jews in general and Israel in particular have been accused of in terms of um, grabbing power,
Right.
manipulating the power centers in Washington and New York and other places, is we never accomplished a fraction of what Qatar has accomplished quietly over the past, I would say, 10 to 15 years.
Interesting.
So, yes, there are people in this government, in the Trump administration, that are, in a word, compromised. And these include people like Stephen Witkoff, and particularly someone we'll be talking about here, Tom Barrack, who is the little known but outsized player in the Middle East right now, who is not just the ambassador to Turkey, American ambassador, but he's also the special envoy, American envoy for Syria. And this guy, Tom Barak, to be perfectly honest with you, should be in jail for attempting to pull off a genocide of the Druze people just a few weeks ago.
Okay, so
He's
you're
not a good guy. He is not a good guy by any stretch of the imagination.
okay. So, Mr. Pollard, I have to now kind of pause and reflect on what you just said. A critic watching this, okay, could say this convicted spy, someone who, again, critic, someone who, betrayed the United States, betrayed his oath to the U.S. intelligence community, may have risked lives of, assets overseas. Yes, served his time. He is naming highly placed individuals in the Trump administration, calling them compromised, and making very blistering claims against them. I am listening. I'm just reflecting that those are very strong claims. What basis do you have, Mr. Pollard, for making such sweeping and potentially libelous claims, if they're not true, right? Depending on the law that governs our conversation, about these individuals in the Trump administration.
Well, I could be flip and just say it takes one to know one. I could say that. Practically speaking, this Mr. Barak was actually prosecuted for being an unregistered foreign agent.
What?
For
What?
Qatar.
What? And
Yeah.
he's the
Now,
ambassador to Turkey currently? Is that
yeah.
what you're saying?
Now he did get out of this case, so we have to acknowledge the fact that he was found innocent. However, if you look at the evidence that the government, the U.S. government, collected against him, it's pretty overwhelming. However, this is Washington, okay?
And
And
excuse me, he was
a lot
accused
of crazy things happen in Washington.
Mr.
Now,
Pollard, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I have to. You're saying he was accused of being an unregistered foreign agent, which, by the way, is a criminal or civil offense?
crime. Yeah, it's a criminal act. Yeah.
It's a criminal act, but for Qatar, is that the
Yes, for Qatar.
country?
For Qatar.
All right, go ahead. I'm listening.
Okay, and he has not stopped representing financial interests in Qatar, and you can kind of see him in the same way as Stephen Witkoff.
Okay.
Both
Now,
of
could
these
you identify
individuals,
Stephen Witkoff's? Sorry, Mr. Pollard. Please identify Stephen Witkoff's role in the administration.
Stephen Witkoff is now a special envoy for the hostage negotiations that are ongoing between Israel and Hamas, and also involving Qatar and Egypt at the same time.
Because
so
Qatar,
what you're having are two.
Right? Mr. Pollard, the reason Qatar is involved in the hostage negotiations is because ostensibly or allegedly Qatar funds or helps to fund Hamas. Is that correct?
No, it's not a supposition. They fund and direct Hamas.
Okay.
And if you want to find where most of the main Hamas leaders are, they're ensconced in Qatar.
So
right now.
you're claiming
so
that
you have this guy, Tom.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, I was just saying.
I mean, basically, you have. Let me just concentrate on Tom Barak and his family background. He originally came from Lebanon, and he is extremely close. He's very proud of the fact that his father had an Ottoman passport, and his relationship as ambassador to U.S. ambassador to Turkey is more of a cheerleader than he is a critic. He sees Turkey in the most benign sense, and he doesn't see them for the threat they pose to the Middle East and, in fact, to Europe as well. So when this new government was formed in Syria, Tom Barrack was given a secondary job of being the U.S. Special Envoy for Syria. And he's been more of a supporter and facilitator of Turkish interests in Syria than he has American interests. His point, Tom Barrack's point, is that what is needed is a unified Syria. Okay. You have to understand that the modern day state of Syria was an artificial creation made by the French government in the wake of World War I.
Right.
And this government, this state, was just like, in a sense, Iraq under the British, and Lebanon also under the French, and even Jordan or Transjordan under the British. They were designed for imperial purposes. And so, much like as we have in Africa, you have diverse groups. You have,
Mr. Pollard, a lot of people say Israel was created for similar reasons.
No, Israel, first of all, as a country, has a 3,000-year history as a country. Yes, Jews were exiled, but we always had people in Israel, and no other country actually had a capital. Subsequent to the Roman destruction of the Jewish state, no other country had a capital in the land of Israel. We were the only ones, and we never gave up our territorial rights to that country.
This is a deep debate. So let's move back to the ambassador to Turkey.
Fine. So
go ahead.
It's very important for Turkey to have a unified Syria, with all the minorities annihilated, because it will make it much easier for a Muslim Brotherhood nation like Turkey to absorb Syria into what they call the caliphate. Okay, so what happens now is you have the various minorities in Syria, the Kurds in the north, the Alawites in the northwest, Christians, as well as, of course, the Druze, saying, wait a second, we don't want to be part of an Al-Qaeda country, because we know what Al-Qaeda does to minorities. What they did to the Yazidis in Iraq, what they did to the Assyrian Christians in Iraq, what they did to the Coptic Christians in the Sinai Peninsula. The Al-Qaeda philosophy basically states that if you're not going to accept their view of Islam, you're dead. And shortly after Giuliani's government took office, there was a massive pogrom against the Alawite minority in northwestern Syria, which is still ongoing. And it's kind of dropped off the media map, but I've seen horrible videos of what's going on even today. And Tom Barrack in particular, is saying, no, this isn't happening. This is just a misunderstanding. Well, it's not a misunderstanding, and it is happening. An attempted genocide. Now, what happened just a few weeks ago?
Mr. Pollard, would you identify who, in your view, are the targets of the attempted genocide in Syria?
In Syria, the genocide policy is directed at the Alawites, who used to be kind of the ruling minority in Syria, because the Assad.
Also a sect of Islam, is that correct?
Pardon?
They are also a sect of Islam. Alawites are also Muslim.
Well, the Alawites and Druze are interesting peoples. and their faiths are basically viewed as being apostate by traditional Muslims. Okay, so they don't fall into the Sunni Muslim tradition.
I see. Okay,
They're
got it.
they're a mixture of many beliefs, but they are not Sunni, and that's the
Gotcha.
important point distinction
Okay.
as far as Al Qaeda is
Was
concerned.
targeted by the Al Qaeda aligned regime in Syria. Go ahead.
Right,
And also
and
Druze.
it was under the direction actually of the Turks that this attempted genocide, which is still ongoing against the Alawites, started. Now you should
Wow.
understand that the Al Qaeda government, which is now in Damascus, which has stood up an army of their own, has a habit of having their soldiers switch uniforms so that they can have plausible deniability.
I see.
So what happened in the Alawite areas of northwest Syria was that you had Syrian army troops changing into terrorist uniforms, Al Qaeda uniforms, and so the government could say, "Hey, we're not committing these atrocities; these terrorists are committing atrocities." But nobody was fooled by this because, well, videos are hard to fake in this sense. You actually saw the Syrian soldiers changing the uniforms and laughing about it.
I mean,
So,
okay, anything's possible with AI these days, but please go ahead.
well, anything is possible with AI, but these are things that the terrorist organizations actually put out themselves, and there were eyewitnesses to this. There were international reporters that were there, BBC reporters in particular, that were there saying, "Hey, this can't go on." I mean, it's this same government that the Americans and the Europeans in particular are seeing as a hope for the future of Syria. And look
Wow.
what they're doing.
Right.
Now, you
Excuse
have
me.
on the ground reporting. This is not AI. This is on the ground reporting by reputable journalists over this uniform changing. All right.
Yes, BBC is a credible source. Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. I dug into their reporting during a wave of alleged atrocity videos, and a lot of what they were putting out could not be properly sourced. So,
well, in this case, it was open. The country was open to the extent that there were international journalists who were present and filmed atrocities occurring.
All right, all right. And were the victims civilians or military or a combination? Like, how were the victims selected, and how were they?
The vast majority of them were civilians, innocent civilians.
Wow.
Okay, there are armed elements of the Alawite community, but they're for self-defense, and they were outgunned and outnumbered by Julani's Syrian army.
Okay.
And
did they just execute them or torture them, or what was the nature of the atrocities?
Yeah, all of the above. It's everything that we saw Al Qaeda do in Iraq. It's everything that we've seen Al Qaeda do in Syria. It's everything that we've seen terrorists, the Hamas, do, for example, with Israeli captives. These people are absolute animals. Now,
and go on to the news, please, if you would. What other victims allegedly or ostensibly were targeted by this group in Syria?
Well, now we have the attack against the Druze that occurred several weeks ago. And that has been videoed so extensively that, it's not even open to question. And just like when Hamas invaded Israel with GoPros on their helmets, the Al Qaeda guys are doing the same thing against the Druze.
They're taking
and it's frightening to see a bunch of. Pardon?
I'm so sorry. We have a little bit of a lag.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
That's fine. I was just saying we have a bit of a
Right.
lag in the audio, which makes me seem like I'm rudely interrupting you when I'm really trying not to.
Okay. Okay.
Did you just say that these Al-Qaeda aligned soldiers of this new Turkish-backed regime are also putting GoPros on their helmets as they commit atrocities against Druze in Syria? Did you
Yes.
just?
In fact, one video that was horrifying showed them lining up Druze men, civilians, on a balcony high up in an apartment complex and forcing them to jump off the balcony while they then moved over and shot them as they were falling. And this has gone viral. And, it's a real problem for people like Tom Barrack to explain away, especially when the individuals committing the atrocities are wearing Syrian army uniforms. They hadn't changed out of their uniforms yet.
Right.
So this attack by Al Qaeda, by Syrian army elements that had changed into Al Qaeda uniforms, and later by the actual Syrian army, and another group, Sunni Bedouin, which have had a blood feud with the Druze for generations. Um, Basically, we here in Israel knew what was going to happen. This was not an intelligence failure on our part. We knew that they were coming to kill the Druze.
No.
And what happened was people like Tom Barrack and others within the Trump administration tied our hands and told us not to intervene. And so while the slaughter ensued, the pressure within Israel on the prime minister grew to such an extent to do something that he had to basically um, forget about listening to the Americans and to actually come to the aid of a minority that was going to be annihilated, the
Did
Syrian
Tom,
Druze.
did Tom Barrack give Israel a reason not to intervene?
Yes, Tom Barrack in particular said that we would complicate the relationship, the growing relationship between the Syrian government and the United States,
Well, I'm sure
and
that's
that the Syrian government was not responsible for
ah,
this ongoing genocide in the South.
mhm,
We knew that to be a lie.
mhm,
And what happened was, shortly after we intervened to save the Druze, Tom Barrack and others within the administration, both within the National Security Council, Mahir Bitar, his name is, and within the State Department, Hadi Amr, basically organized a media campaign to discredit Bibi Netanyahu, where they called him a madman, for example, for dropping bombs everywhere, and for obscuring the fact that it was the Syrian government itself, acting along with the Turkish government, that was actually attempting to annihilate this Druze minority in Syria. So they did two things. One, they covered, Barrack and his friends in Washington covered what the Syrian government was doing by claiming, oh, they're not responsible, while at the same time they launched a media campaign, a defamatory campaign against Prime Minister Netanyahu and the state of Israel, that they were somehow, inflaming the situation and making the situation worse by intervening on behalf of the Druze. So this is why many people, myself included, believe very strongly that Tom Barrack, in particular, should be indicted for attempting genocide of a minority people in Syria. He doesn't seem to this day seem to get it, that what he's doing is not reforming a country like Syria, to be a member of the international community in good standing. But he understands very well that as an continuing to be an agent, if you will, of influence of Qatar and Turkey, that this unified state of Syria that he keeps talking about will be an al-Qaeda state that will only serve the interests of Qatar and Turkey, not the international community.
Wow.
So it's a very dangerous and complicated situation, and the facts are clear. People just have to look for them, but they're available.
Gotcha. So it's so interesting that this is barely a whisper in a lot of the legacy media, at least in the United States. I don't think most people are aware that Alawite and Druze civilians have been murdered or attacked in Syria by a changed regime.
You know what I call this, Naomi?
What?
I call this Rwanda 2.0.
Wow.
This is I mean, with Rwanda, a lot of people didn't know what was going on. They really didn't. There wasn't enough reporting on what was going on. And it was only in retrospect that the Clinton administration understood the mistake of not intervening to stop a genocide of the Tutsi. Here, it's in broad daylight. Everybody, at least in this neck of the woods, knows precisely what is going on. And they cannot understand, for the life of them, why the United States should be on the side of a bunch of al-Qaeda terrorists. It doesn't make, who are trying to annihilate an otherwise peaceful minority like the Druze.
I want to note that the Druze inside of Israel are longtime, really decades-long allies of the state of Israel and even serve in the Israel Defense Forces. So
correct, they are loyal citizens of the state, and they're very concerned about their family members across the border in Syria. And part of the pressure that was put on Prime Minister Netanyahu came originally from the Druze Israeli community that was absolutely horrified of what was ongoing in the Syrian parts of the Druze community. So once the Israeli Druze started making noise about this whole thing, basically the Israeli population also sided with them. That we can't stand idly by and watch this minority, along with Christians and Alawites and Kurds, those are the main minorities in Syria, just be annihilated.
Right.
We can't.
And Kurds are a minority. Sorry, Kurds are a minority in Turkey as well, aren't they?
They are a seriously persecuted minority in Turkey.
Okay, so let me pause for a minute, Mr. Pollard. I understand now the essentials of the story as you're telling it. And I understand from having lived in Israel, for many years and knowing about the loyalty of the Druze in Israel, which really is very moving to a lot of Israelis, that people who are not Jewish, would serve in the military and support the state of Israel, put their own lives, at risk by serving in the military. I imagine the pressure at a grassroots level in Israel on Bibi Netanyahu to protect the Druze in Syria, as well as, now let me zoom out big picture. If there's an al-Qaeda aligned new regime in Syria, what does that do to the security of the state of Israel?
What happens is that our border in the Golan will face the same kind of threat that our communities along the Gaza envelope faced before October 7th. There could be an invasion, a overnight invasion that could result in a slaughter of our civilians as bad as, if not worse, than what happened on October 7th down south. Secondly, and this is the more dangerous part of this situation, assuming we have these al-Qaeda elements hard on our border up north, the Turkish army will be down there as well. People don't realize that the Turkish army is very well trained to NATO standards. They are incredibly sophisticated. They have what it can only be described as an awesome domestic military industrial complex, in some respects far more superior to what we have in Israel. And this has come to us as a surprise to me, but facts are facts. And so we, instead of facing an Iranian threat to our northern frontier, we would find ourselves facing a massive, well-armed, well-trained Turkish army that has access to all of the sophisticated military equipment that a NATO country would have. Right. We would be faced with an existential threat to the north.
Wow. And, what is Qatar's...
And the lesson from October 7th is we mustn't allow an existential threat to grow without preemptively or preventively eliminating it. Well, you're talking about another war, and we don't want that. And this is why the idea of creating a Druze autonomous zone on our northern border to serve more or less as a buffer between the Syrian army and probably Turkish elements and our Golani border is really viewed as the best of a bad series of options at our disposal.
Okay, so a critic would say that the proposal of a Druze autonomous zone in the Golan Heights or in the northern border of Israel, southern border of Syria, is really just a cover for a long-planned land grab for the greater Israel. What would you say to that?
Well, I'm not going to deny the fact that the creation of this Druze enclave has a geostrategic value for Israel. It does. However, this geostrategic value also coexists with our need to defend a minority on our northern border that has a very large community of relatives within Israel, loyal relatives within Israel as well. So there are strategic reasons, and there are also altruistic reasons for us to be interested in standing up this Druze enclave. I might add, I haven't mentioned, nobody here has in Israel, the idea of annexing this area. Now, when the Bashar Assad government fell and the Al-Qaeda HTS movement took over Damascus, there were Druze leaders that begged us, especially in a region called the Bashan, which is in the northern part of this enclave, begged us to annex them as a means of protecting them from what just happened. So we're not interested, nobody that I know of is talking about annexing land into what is called a greater Israel or anything else, although we have to admit that these areas were part of biblical Israel. Right. But we're not making that claim right now. We're not making a territorial claim.
No, I understand that. But again, devil's advocate, it's my job to, bring to you the questions that I know many people have in their minds right now. If you zoom out big picture, we haven't talked about Gaza, but a critic would say that, Israel has not claimed territorial reconquering of the Gazan territory, but in effect, the preparation is underway for that to take place. Couldn't someone argue that both of these moves are, and it's, arguably understandable from an Israeli point of view, if you've got enemies like this, I'm not justifying any murder of any civilians in any direction whatsoever, but arguably, given enemies like this, Bibi Netanyahu could see that there's a strategic need for, a buffer to the north and a buffer to the south. What would you say to that?
Okay, as far as the buffer in the north is concerned, again, it's very important to realize that the population of this proposed buffer area would be allies of Israel. We are not talking about expelling them. We are not talking about
people who are not Druze. I mean, I've been to southern Lebanon with the IDF, actually embedded as a journalist during
well, that's Lebanon. We're not
I'm so sorry.
talking about,
excuse me. I beg your pardon. What would you
yeah.
do with the people who are not Druze in southern Syria?
Okay, as far as southern Syria is concerned, we have to take Druze interests into account. Right now, the two major threatened minorities in this area are the Druze and Christians.
Okay.
There are three areas that we're talking about: the Bashan in the north, Dara in the center, and Sueda, which people have heard about, in the east.
Right.
Those are the three areas. The problem is with Dara, which is in the middle of these two groups, because it's a Sunni area that are it's loaded with jihadis, Al Qaeda, and Sunni Bedouin who have this blood feud with the Druze.
Okay.
Now you have to understand. You have to understand that unless those elements, the Sunni elements in Dara, are expelled into Syria proper, we can't create a buffer, a unified buffer across northern Jordan. And why is this important? The Jordanian, the Hashemite government in Jordan is scared to death that they're going to have a common border with Al Qaeda. The Jordanians are basically one, I hate to put it this way, one bullet away from becoming an Al Qaeda country, an Al Qaeda state.
All right. I'm just showing on this.
The Hashemites are basically a minority group that have
You're breaking up a great deal, Mr. Pollard. Your audio is breaking
powered by the British. Bedouin group. They're a Bedouin group, and there are many Muslim Brotherhood elements within Jordan that want to see them gone. Now, if they have a common border with Dara, pardon?
No, your audio is breaking up significantly, but keep talking. We heard you say if they have a common border. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
It's okay. Yeah.
Okay. The issue here is not just our need to protect a minority or our need to protect northern Israel. We also have an interest in protecting Jordan.
Is
They
of Israel's
may not like to admit it openly, but in private conversation.
Our audio is so bad. I don't know if this is going to work.
We and the Jordanian, stopping the spread of Al Qaeda throughout the Middle East. So the only way we can protect Jordan from infiltration in the north, where there will be Israeli forces there backstopping, so to speak. Pardon?
No, we've got a lot of audio interference. I heard you say that informally Jordan is supportive or at least apprehensive.
Okay. No, the Druze understand that they're going to have Israeli forces. As far as Jordan is concerned, Jordan is in Jordan.
You know, this is so interesting, Mr. Pollard. I had similar audio interference with an interview I did with Professor Gutzko in Tel Aviv about injuries and to pregnant women from the mRNA vaccine in Israel.
Jordan would like nothing more than to have this Druze enclave, this uniform enclave along their northern border, because it would give them, just like it would give us, a buffer to defend themselves or to prevent the infiltration of Al-Qaeda terrorists into Jordan itself.
Okay, duly noted. So we only have a few minutes left, and we are having significant audio interference or problems. In our last few minutes, let me zoom out again from the point of view of the US's involvement or lack of involvement.
With regard, I should say,
Whatever.
The mRNA vaccine in Israel?
We have a very big delay, such a big delay, it's hard to have a conversation. If you can hear this, please say in our last few minutes, has the Trump administration ceased, in your view, to be an ally to Israel because of what you say is Qatari influence on members of the Trump administration? Are you getting any audio from me? Any audio coming through, Mr. Pollard?
Correct. If I could, I just wanted to answer your question with regard to Gaza. The situation in Gaza, for the day after, so to speak, is completely different from the problems that we're facing in the north with the Druze. In the north, we have a peaceful, sympathetic minority that want our help, and we want to help them for a number of reasons. In the south, the situation is completely and utterly different. The Hamas did not appear ex nihilo, out of thin air. It was the people of Gaza who voted that government, that organization, into power. And ever since we pulled out of Gaza, they have been indoctrinated into an Al-Qaeda philosophy, a doctrine. And as far as the people here are concerned in Israel, what we saw on October 7th and what our people experienced were not just Hamas forces crossing the border, but thousands upon thousands of everyday, average, normal, quote, normal, Gazan civilians coming across to loot, to pillage, to burn, to decapitate, and to rape, and to kidnap. So this is why there is only one way we can live in peace in the South. And that's if the population of Gaza is removed and our biblical land into Israel.
You just said it. All right.
I don't know why people in the West believe that we should be feeding an enemy population that hates our guts.
Okay.
We don't understand this at all.
Okay. Mr.
These
Pollard.
people came across the border, raped, murdered, and pillaged innocent civilians, Jews, and now they're crying for help because they're not eating and they're not receiving adequate equipment, medical equipment. Excuse me for pointing this out, but I think people's ire, people's anger should perhaps be directed at either Hamas, that started this war, or at Egypt, which is a war, to have safe haven where they in Egypt, where they can be fed, where they can be in Gaza. Nobody is pointing an accusing finger at Egypt for committing a war crime, a humanitarian crime, by not allowing an endangered civilian population to come into their country and be protected.
Okay.
They're the ones that should be on trial in The Hague, not us.
Okay.
But
Mr.
everybody's
Pollard,
protecting Egypt. Everything is okay as far as Egypt is concerned.
Mr.
But
Pollard,
it's not okay.
I have
So
to
as
jump
far
in.
as Gaza is concerned, which, as I've just explained, is completely different from the north, it is a matter of life and death that we expel the population to who care Gaza with our people.
Okay.
And that's the only way we are going to guarantee.
Thank you. Mr. Pollard, I am so sorry. I have another meeting in just a few minutes. We've just run a bit over time. We're also having audio delays, but this has been one of the most interesting interviews I've ever had. I'm sure many people have very strong responses to what you've shared, for and against, but I appreciate your time. And there's so much you brought up, including what you just ended with, that could be the subject of a whole other conversation in the future. So I hope you will come back. We can pick up where we left off, hopefully. And in the meantime, thank you for this incredibly illuminating, if highly controversial, discussion in which you've shared a great deal of information from your point of view, no doubt from the Israeli government's point of view, that we did not have. I'm so sorry. I have to go now. Where can people find you? Where do people follow you?
It's hard. It's difficult.
All right, that's
I
good
have
enough.
a podcast. The best place is right here with you. That would be the best place.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Pollard. I hope to speak with you again. Thank you for sharing your views with our audience. Very grateful.
My pleasure. Be well.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.